Welcome to the Startup Grind.
This is Jean Blommo. I forgot to ask to pronounce your name. And she's been a business consultant and coach for 10 years. And then when I first met her, she was talking about how she resolves conflicts within companies and businesses. And statistically, one of the biggest reasons startups fail is because of founder conflict. And I've been in a number of startups and have been in, we have seen I have personally seen serious conflicts, with startups that I've been involved with. And I've also seen startups that seem very promising. They seem to have good tech and a good product. And I found out later that the founders didn't get along and the startup imploded. And this is something that even though as common as it is, I actually haven't seen too many workshops that actually address it. There's a lot of workshops on developing your product and market fit, but none that specifically talk about, managing founder conflict. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, Gene, and you can go ahead and share your presentation.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see some familiar faces here. Thank you for coming. So as Rich mentioned, I've been working with leaders and their teams with communication and, creating a more efficient type of work environment. And that's typically been with entrepreneurs, small businesses, a few community leaders. And what I've found is that events like this, working within a community, it's super important. As Rich mentioned, it can be a really lonely place working in this kind of siloed online environment. So it's so great that you're taking the time out of your day investing in this community building. My intention today is to give you some practical tips, touch on some real world examples, and I'm going to ask you for a little bit of interaction today too, and understand when it's time to bring in a neutral third party mediator person, like when it's time to say, I don't think I can handle this anymore. It's time to bring in someone else. And if you're watching the recording, I really encourage you to practice some of the things that we're going to go through today. And there's going to be some questions at the end that you can take with you, talk to your co-founder about it, or talk to your spouse or your coworker or your boss, depending on your situation. And so our main goal today is to increase your chance of success in your startup. And as Rich had mentioned, a lot of the reason that startups fail is that interpersonal conflict or conflict on the foundations of the startup. And I want to actually start by saying conflict isn't bad, although it has a bad rap. And I want to check in and see what are some signs for you, and you can put this in chat, that conflict is getting bad. It's getting to an unhealthy place. So what are some of those signs or symptoms that you've experienced in your life where conflict was getting to an unhealthy place or a toxic place? So anyone want to volunteer ideas, or you could go ahead and put it in chat.
In my last startup, we actually, the founder and I actually had this, and I don't even recall what the issue was. We had a yelling match in his office, and I finally had to walk away, and we resolved it afterwards. But I was actually surprised. We're both fairly, um, we're not that type of person, but there was some issues that was boiling up, and if it just resulted in a yelling match. And just
Yeah,
in front of all the other, I think it stunned a lot of the people in the office.
yeah. So that's great, Rich. So, well, not great, I guess, in this case. So on one end is yelling matches, and I see Irma on the other end of the spectrum, communication stops. Yeah, that's also a sign of unhealthy conflict. Uh, Conversations through intermediaries, yes. So basically, direct conversation is stopping, refusing to talk. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? That a lot of the responses here are around not communicating. So what tends to happen for a lot of people is the reduction in communication. And that's the sign that conflict has gotten so unhealthy. Maybe you don't feel safe interacting with that other person anymore. So the idea is that you can create a relationship that's resilient. And that means that you're not in yelling matches, and it means you're not communicating. You're somewhere in the middle. You're able to have a conversation. It might feel really uncomfortable, but then you're able to recover from it and kind of like exercise. That conflict can actually make you stronger. But too much conflict or too little conflict, avoiding it, can actually make you weaker. It makes your relationship weaker. So let's shift into just touching upon in startups. What are some of those touchy subjects or um, spiky type of topics that tend to really get co-founders in conflict? So I wrote a few down here and I'm curious. Okay, perfect. There's one: direction, fundraising, your equity, and fairness and workload, or the value that you believe you're contributing to the startup. Is there anything else I'm missing here that you've seen or heard that tends to be those common areas of conflict?
How another founder or team member is not contributing.
Yeah. Okay. So feeling like there's an unfair balance. Yeah. Or maybe scope, like your scope of work is increasing and that another person is not. So let's kind of shift gears. We talked about unhealthy conflict. So what is healthy conflict? What does that look like? Who here has actually had a disagreement, an argument with someone, and then it actually led to something better between the two of you or between a group? What did that look like or feel like in the moment and after? What does healthy conflict look like?
I don't know if this is healthy, but the yelling match that we got with my co-founder,
Hmm.
I think I finally walked out, and then the next day when we had cooler heads, we were able to work it out. And I actually, for the life of me, I can't even remember what it was. That was actually ended up being yelling. Um, but we respected enough each other enough, and we resolved it. And I think going forward, it went well. And I think at that point, it was just boiling. And then when it finally came, it was like, uh, like it was bad. We had this argument in front of all our employees and stuff. But afterwards,
Yeah,
we resolved it, and it was good. I think we kind of needed it. It's just the way it came out was probably not good.
right. Yeah, thanks for that, Reg. Anyone else? Yeah, Irma.
Well, I just, after about 2 years of a conflict that wasn't resolved, just about 2 weeks ago, I finally communicated with people who I had a conflict with, and we broke up. Basically, our communication stopped. But I reached out, and without knowing if they were going to want to talk to me, and it's an uncomfortable situation because it was a bad breakup, but now our relationship is back on after a very real and vulnerable exchange. So it could still
Mm,
happen. It may not happen right away, but it could still be. I felt like it could still be mended.
yeah. Yeah, great. And I'm reading some of these comments too. And so I think some of the common threads here I'm seeing and noticing is maybe it felt really uncomfortable when it was happening, but you were able to kind of move through it. And there was this sense of needing to remain calm and doing what you need to do to remain calm, maybe removing yourself from that situation or from communication for a little bit. And then this desire to be understood and to understand the other person. So those are some of the signs that, conflict actually is moving in the direction of being healthy and able to be repaired and make you more resilient. So let's shift into know thyself. So part of this work of conflict is understanding your own patterns. And this is the work I did with Irma and Deep Living Lab before becoming a coach consultant full time. So with Deep Living Lab, using the Enneagram as a way of kind of understanding your patterns. And there's three conflict styles that come into play here. I'll share with you a little visual. So assertive, withdrawn, unresponsible. And I want you to focus more on thinking about these are patterns that we tend to have, not you're putting yourself into a box and this is always how you're reacting. So it's something to think about. Assertive types tend to want to quickly resolve, like, let's hash this out right now. They're not afraid necessarily of confronting the problem or the other person. Withdrawn types tend to want to think about it and kind of process what's happening, maybe by themselves, maybe with other people in their lives, but they don't necessarily want to quickly resolve a conflict. And then this third type, responsible, what they will tend to do is kind of figure out what are the rules of engagement here? What is the best process? What does the other person want? What's the right way of going about this? And there's nothing right or wrong about any of these styles, but what can happen is the style that you're used to may or may not be the best one in that circumstance. And so I want to ask for a volunteer to go through a very low stakes situation so we can talk about this a little more. Neil, thank you. Okay, Neil, what is your favorite restaurant and what's your favorite meal at that restaurant?
My favorite restaurant is probably oh, there's so many. But I would say it's just right down the street, Mediterranean kebab.
Okay, what do you like to get there?
The I think it's called the Alexander kebab. It's yeah, it's kind of this rich, tasty,
Okay,
meaty.
is it like lamb or something?
It is. It is.
Okay, so let's say you go to that restaurant, you sit down, you order your lamb kebab, and they bring you out falafel. It looks great, it's delicious falafel.
Yeah.
What's your typical reaction in that scenario?
I would point out that this is not what I ordered.
Okay, so out of those, you would go back up to the counter, you go back to the waitress, and you say, "This is not what I ordered."
Mhm.
Okay,
I
and
would
use
just like present the facts.
yes, present the facts. Beautiful. Okay, so of those three styles, assertive, withdrawn, responsible, how would you categorize that? Which one is the best choice there?
In such a what I feel might be a clear cut, there's not much to think about there. I would always want to approach it responsibly, but
Okay,
there's not much to think about there. It's like this is clearly not what I asked for.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So great. Thank you, Neil. Has anyone else, thought about this question and they would have a totally different reaction or response? Yeah, Irma.
Well, I would do the same thing as Neil, say, this is not what I order, but it really looks good. Can you just give it to me for free because this is not what I ordered? Um, so that, it would be an opportunity for me to get something from them.
Yeah. Okay, great. So these are two situations where maybe both of you are sort of like responsible. It sounds responsible in both cases, actually, right? Like here's the rules of engagement. I ordered this, I got that, but you know what? I'm willing maybe to be flexible here. Or, what can you do for me to resolve this issue? Someone else might be so intimidated they might actually say, I'm just gonna be okay with this. I'm just gonna try it. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to go back to the waitress. I don't want to tell her it's wrong. I'm just gonna eat this meal and be happy with it.
I've done that.
Okay, great. So this is just a way of illustrating that even at something as simple as a meal, people are going to have different responses to that, not necessarily conflict in this situation, but sort of like you're asking for one thing and you're getting something else, right? And when that happens, all sorts of reactions are possible. The more you can understand your own habits, the own way you deal with it, the better you can have empathy for other people's habits and, what they go to in different situations. All right. So any questions on those three styles?
I think it's interesting that the way you position these things are kind of neutral. I mean, I've heard of being conflict avoidant, but
Mm,
I don't. It's harder to admit in a way that you are conflict avoidant, you know, because it
yeah,
sounds kind of negative. But
yeah,
this is different
yeah.
viewpoint.
Yeah, it's like different relationships to conflict versus like black and white. Yeah, great. Okay, and yes, Bilal, we'll share with you the slides, and I have like a little handout at the end too. So there's a method of having a higher stakes conversation called nonviolent communication. Have any of you heard of this process before? I'm seeing some nodding. Great. And there's something that I like to talk about in context of nonviolent communication, which is pinches and crunches. So this comes from a book called Connect. So a pinch is like a little tiny issue that you're having with someone. It kind of pinches you, right? And so we just talked about for some people, they might, bring up those pinches every single time. They're assertive, they have no problem bringing it up, bringing it up, bringing it up. For other people, they might say, it's not really worth it. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to overreact to this pinch. Unfortunately, that pinch can lead to what this book refers to as a crunch, something bigger. And Rich, I wonder if that's kind of what happened in the scenario you were talking about. Maybe a bunch of little pinches led to this explosive reaction. So that could be possible.
Yeah, I think in my case it was we had this customer and we had all this like deadline and we were all under the gun and I remember it was high pressure, really high pressure plus
Yeah,
entities breaking down. So it probably wasn't like I don't feel like I would be a yelling person, but I think he said something to me and it set me off, you know.
yeah, yeah. So it might have been all these external factors too. It doesn't necessarily mean the person you had that conflict with was causing the pinches in this case. It could have been like a bunch of external factors, right? So let's say you do realize this is not something I can tolerate anymore. I need to have a conversation. So I'm going to go through the nonviolent communication process very briefly. This is a huge body of work with lots of depth to it. I'm not going to do it complete justice today, but I think it's great to at least have those stepping stones, and you can note them down and try this in your next conversation. So there's a few different steps here, and the most important first step is setting your intention. So what do you want out of this conversation with your co-founder, with your coworker, with your spouse? What is it that you're looking to achieve? And what were some of the indicators that you were upset? So basically, you're having a conversation with yourself first before you bring in the other person, if it's a higher stakes type of conversation. Next, you're going to share your observation. So I'm going to just give this example of in a startup. So let's say that your co-founder received an email from a potential investor and they haven't responded to it. And you've asked them a couple of times to respond to it because you feel like this is an important conversation for you guys to have with them. So sharing your observation could be something like, I noticed that it's been over 24 hours since we received this email and you haven't responded, versus you never respond to any email that comes back. You're so slow every time, right? So the observation needs to be very focused and very specific on the conversation, the situation at hand. Next, this one is really critical, if not the most important in my opinion, which is sharing the impact it's having on you. This is the only way the other person can truly understand what's happening for you. And so you can say something like, because you haven't responded, I'm feeling really nervous that maybe we're missing our opportunity with this person. And that makes me a little scared about our future as a company. Only then do you ask again, because this time hopefully the request will have greater impact for them. Can you please respond and set up a meeting with this person? I need you to take ownership of this. I need you to take responsibility for this. And then you can also share the value. I think I skipped that one. Yes. So sharing the value, what it is that you're looking for from that request. And then lastly, I've added this one on here is following up. Can we agree to talk about this again next week or tomorrow? Okay. So does anyone have a recent, maybe low to medium stakes example that they're willing to share that we can walk through this? Maybe something happened and maybe you have some regrets or questions about, could I have handled this differently or better? And we can try this alternative way of going through your conflict. Anyone willing to share? It doesn't have to be a huge, giant blow up, but something that could give some color to this process. Yeah, Neil. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I can if nobody else wants to. So, yeah, so I and I apologize for joining late. A little context on me real quick is that I co-founded a consulting firm and was there for 20 years. I left during the pandemic. So I co-founded it with three other people, and one of them is they're still dear friends, and one of them is still the CEO. But many times in doing client work, client projects, deadlines, high pressure deliverables, this is like management consulting, strategic consulting stuff. there would be times when our small teams, 3, 4, 5 people would be working on a deliverable, and sort of like at the last minute, our CEO would come in and he'd spot something that wasn't quite right. And there's a decision, there's kind of an issue, fundamental issue sometimes in the situation of does it need to be that person's definition of perfect, or
Mm,
is it good enough and we can get this hardworking team home? Uh,
yeah.
and that's something that comes up. Um,
Yeah, that's great. So to me, that sounds like part 2 and 3, right? Is like as you're talking through this decision, like what is the impact on you? Like your stress level, your ability to turn out high quality work, and your value perhaps of wanting to provide high quality work instead of just rushing things through. So perhaps in that conversation, focusing on um, less about like the situation at hand, which is important to state what happened, but just sharing, here's what's going on for me. That allows then for conversation around what other options are there. And actually, I didn't say this, it's super important, is this isn't a monologue, right? This is a conversation. And hopefully, if both people are trained in this method, then you can go through this process together and be sharing back and forth.
yeah.
Anything else you want to add to that, Neil? Yeah.
Um, well, this is actually very similar to something that we we were exposed to and kind of trained up on very early on in our history, because we were having conflicts, and we were fortunate enough to meet a coach and to bring her in. And but we what we used as a model was had a different name, but it was very similar.
Mm,
We called it OTFD, open the front door. But observations, feelings, thoughts, and desire was or do differently, right? That was the request.
great.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so the I see Irma's asking, and what would be your request to that person? Um, Often it would just start with kind of bringing just a level of awareness to the person that there was an impact. It's like, dude, we're like almost finished with this thing, and it's 9 o'clock, and you're coming in now and saying this is, it. I'm seeing disruption. You know, the hour's late, the thing is almost finished. The team feels like it's pretty good work. There's some disruption here. Um, and sometimes it would be me speaking up for the team or for myself. Like I'm feeling like this doesn't feel good, right?
Yeah.
Um, we we all want to do really good work, but we also don't want to burn people out. So
Absolutely.
can you be a little clearer about what's at stake here, and is this really an exigent circumstance?
Yeah. And that also, Irma, touches on that intention, right? Because if you're clear with your intention, coming up with that request becomes a lot easier at the end, because then hopefully your intention and your request are aligned. And it could sometimes be, I just need you to listen to me and hear my stress level right now. And that could be enough of a request that feels good.
It
Yeah.
can change the tone of whatever everything else that happens.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Any other questions, comments about nonviolent communication as a process to use? Great. All right, moving into co-founders agreements. So my understanding is that most co-founders sign some sort of legal document coming up with the outline of their um, agreements to each other, their roles, what equity they will have in the company, how you're going to go about different important parts of your startup, how that's going to go. And I haven't seen or heard of people using conflict agreements or like how to resolve conflict very often. So I'm curious, anyone that's been involved with startups here, have you seen this? What have you seen in there? What isn't in there? Any comments on like the current state of these co-founder agreements? And Rich, especially you, with all of the consulting you do.
So I would say that I've never really heard of um, a conflict agreement. Maybe the closest thing is in the startup, one of the startups I worked with, and I told my co-founder that, if you have a disargument, you're the CEO, and at the end because you're a subject matter expert, you'll have the final word. And I told that to
Right.
him personally, but it wasn't like it was formal.
Yeah.
That's probably the closest I think, and that was just me saying that to him, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So I think this is like a huge area of opportunity, I think. It doesn't necessarily need to be a legal document, but I do think it could be a way you can have a conversation with your co-founder about how are we going to fight? How are we going to disagree? What are our sort of rules of engagement, and how can we make sure that we are building a stronger relationship every time we have a disagreement versus breaking down? And I love this quote from Crucial Conversations, if you've ever read that book. Um, Crucial conversations often go awry, not because of the content of the conversation, but because others believe that the painful and pointed content means that you have malicious intent. And that's kind of a way of structuring this rules of engagement with your co-founder, is going into it thinking, we have positive intent with each other. We want to make things better. No matter what happens, we're going into this trying to resolve it, not trying to attack each other, tear each other down. And so what you can do is take a few different basic best practices. So what I just covered, assuming positive intent, listening to understand each other, not immediately respond or disagree. You can you can agree to use the nonviolent communication process with each other. And as we were talking about earlier, you can try to expand your go-to style. So if one of you is a little bit more assertive and the other person is more withdrawn, just knowing that about each other and agreeing that sometimes the assertive person might need to back off, and sometimes maybe the more withdrawn person needs to speak up more, and having that agreement with each other up front, that conversation with each other up front, that can lead to more success when you do have something that comes up. And then the second part of this is to go through these questions together. So what do you need to have in place when you're having a difficult conversation? So think about the last kind of intense conversation you've had with someone. What's the environment you need? What is the time of day that works best for you? What do you want to have in place before you enter into that intense conversation? Any ideas? You can put them in chat or just speak up. I'll say for myself, I need to make sure I've eaten a meal recently. I am not fun to argue with if I'm hungry. So that can be a rule that you have with each other. It's like just making sure your basic biological needs are met, checking in with each other before you have the conversation. No technology distractions, great. Yeah, there's nothing worse than trying to talk to someone on their phone. Anything else? Yeah, checking your state. Great. So another key to this is understanding how do you plan on giving and receiving feedback? Just because one person is, as Rich was saying, designated CEO, other person is in another role. Just because that's happening doesn't mean the CEO shouldn't get feedback, shouldn't receive feedback or um, maybe some criticism sometimes, some helpful criticism. So how are you going to share with each other what you're noticing about each other so that it doesn't feel like you can't talk to that other person about what you're having issues with, even if they're in this, higher up role than you? And then, as we were talking about, when is it the best time to bring in a third party? So, any ideas on that? Like, how would you know that this isn't working anymore and it's time to invest in a third party? What are some of those signs for you? You're Mega.
Well, I think that is an important question at the beginning if the other person is willing to have a third party involved. Just that question alone will say a lot.
Yeah. So checking in with each other and both people agree it's time. It's time to bring in someone. Yeah. What about harkening back to the beginning of our conversation, those kind of um, the signs of unhealthy conflict? So communication has stopped for a certain period of time, or you're only communicating via text or email, or yeah, you're getting stonewalled. So, or every time you meet, it turns into a shouting match. So those are times maybe when bringing in a third party is critical. When it goes from moderate conflict to it's feeling unhealthy, microaggressions. Yeah. Anything else you can think of there? Okay. So choosing someone to have that to be that mediator, just some basics here. They seem obvious, but I think it's really important to point these out. Someone you can both trust, and I would say if it is someone that you both know, you need to think through how is this going to change the dynamics of the relationships of everyone involved, right? So sometimes it is better to involve someone neither of you know and neither of you are in contact with often. And that way it kind of keeps that relationship clean. Um, Ideally, you're meeting with someone before you have conflict. So maybe you've already designated someone as your mediator, third party, when things are going really well. And then they're kind of ready to go if something does come up. And it's someone that really needs to be able to clarify your goals and allow each of you to share, and then they can facilitate that conversation. I'm just reading your note here, Neil. Yeah. Is this the collective? Is this the dynamic we want? Is this what we're really trying to build here? Yeah. So I want to wrap up before, and I'm not sure if you have other announcements, Rich, after I wrap up here. Just curious, what is one or two takeaways that some of you have learned today so far? Yeah, Melissa.
I think I'm just looking at my screenshots that I took. To, I think assuming positive intent is a really important piece. As someone who sometimes ends up being the mediator, I think that that slide really resonated with me to be like, hey, let's make sure that everybody in this conversation has positive intent because I think that's a good checklist to help mediate the problems.
Yeah, great. Great. It just changes the mood, right? It changes it from the intensity level of like, what is this person trying to do? Are they manipulating? What's going on here? And it changes it to, okay, how can we collaboratively come together, even if there's been hurt?
Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes you have long-standing dynamics between leaders or founders and things like that. And so just kind of having to level set the conversation can be helpful. Just a nice reminder.
Yeah. All right. Setting your intention before starting a conversation. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think I was talking about this before, Gene, but you know,
Mm.
when you start a business with somebody, it's like getting married to them. In fact, you may actually spend more time with them than your actual spouse. And you said, I think it was earlier on, but actually I never thought of it, but having agreed upon methodology of resolving conflict ahead of time. Uh, that's kind of interesting because you will have conflict. So at least if you agree upon a framework to resolve the conflict, that would help in the future. It's something I actually never thought about. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, and I would love to see this as part of the co-founder agreement that's put in place or like an addendum to it. It would be difficult to legally bind to that, I think, in a lot of situations, but it at least requires you to have those conversations up front when things are good and exciting and you do assume positive intent. Yeah. Talking about conflict when things are going well. Yes, great. Couples counseling for business partners. Well, Bob, that's what I do. That's what I do. I've worked with a couple of family businesses, and this is really intense in families. As you can imagine, relationships are quite complex. So the more you can follow a process, have a third party, um, and keep the conversation going, the better. Yeah, great. Okay, so I just want to wrap up here. So we covered first understanding your own habits or your own kind of go-to when there's conflict. You know, there's assertive styles, more withdrawn, and then this responsible style. So understanding that, and I highly encourage you just over the next couple of weeks when something comes up, notice what your go-to is and have compassion for that. And maybe ask yourself, how else could I have responded in that situation? How else could I have handled it? um, and then we moved into nonviolent communication process and learning about setting your intention, talking through what you observed, you know, clarifying the impact it had on you, your values, requesting, and then finding a time to follow up. And then lastly, we talked about how to have agreements in place with your co-founder when things are good so that you increase the chances of success if things go sideways. And I just want to say thank you all for your participation and using some of those real world examples. It definitely gives color to some of these concepts. So thank you all. Thank you, Rich, for allowing me to participate as facilitator here today. And I'll hand it back over to you.
Actually, Gene, before you go, why don't you
Yeah.
put contact information since you are kind of a quote unquote couples counselor? So if anybody here has you need your help, you can put in your contact information, your website, etc.
Absolutely. Best way to reach me is my email. I put it there. And oh yeah, I've completely forgot I was going to share this handout with you guys. So let me see if I can drop it into the chat here.
I don't know if you can.
Um,
Yeah, there's a file button.
yeah, let's see. Let me make sure I use the right one. There's that. And if you email me, I'll send you the slides as well. But honestly, the handout has all of the slide information. So